Hey guys. So, hopefully, you're familiar with this series by now. I reread a series of mystery novels by Jonathan Kellerman in my spare time. It's just kind of my way of decompressing during what little downtime I get. And I really enjoy rereading the same books because I enjoy the characters. I've always liked murder mysteries and so on and so forth. So, as far as my rereading this time around, and as far as this web series, we have made it to the third book in the series, which is Over the Edge. As I've said in the past, these videos are not specifically for people that haven't read the books before, but just in case you've happened upon this video and you haven't read the book before, I will give you a little bit of a synopsis, just going from memory. So, the main character, Dr. Alex Delaware, is a child psychologist, and he has a former patient named Jamie Cadmus, who he met through a group of teens that he was mentoring that all had IQs above 160. It was called Project 160. And I was just trying to help them get adjusted, given that they are much smarter than the rest of the population. And Jamie was one of those kids. And they had some interaction when Jamie was a kid, and then he hadn't heard from him again. And then he got a call from him in the middle of the night, and apparently Jamie was hospitalized and in danger. And he went out to try to see him in the hospital, and it turns out Jamie had escaped from the hospital. And then the running theory, which Alex Delaware didn't necessarily believe from the beginning, other people did, some didn't, was that Jamie, in escaping from the hospital, had killed, I think, 2 people and had possibly been behind a series of serial killings. And so Alex sets out with the blessing of Jamie's defense attorney to try to understand, if he actually did the killings, and if so, how it happened, and then, theoretically to participate in his legal defense. And through the course of the book, I think the reader pretty much always doubts that Jamie was guilty. I think we're not supposed to think that he was guilty from the beginning, and we're supposed to certainly hope that he's not. But in terms of his culpability and involvement and guilt, and who actually is guilty, comes as a bit of a surprise at the end of the book. And I will try not to give that away in this discussion. So, here's my notes from the book. So, again, these are just the kind of notes that, after reading the book, that I would discuss in a book club, that I'd want to discuss with the author, that I'd want to discuss with the publisher, or just other people that are as involved in the series that I am. I think I've used the illusion in several times that I've had these discussions as though I'm sitting down having coffee with the author. And actually, today, I have some coffee, so that helps. Okay, so these are my notes. I am mad at Alex for how he first handled Jamie when Jamie first hugged him. I shouldn't be. I don't know if Alex could have handled it any better. I don't know that I would have handled it any better in his place, but I am. In this book, Lou Cestare is semi-retired. Lou Cestare is Alex's financial manager, and Alex consults him about financial matters and some other things. And in this book, he's semi-retired after just a career change, kind of the same way Alex did. And in future books, it references that his career was over after Black Monday. I keep wanting to say Black Friday. Black Monday. And so I'm wondering if that's a continuity error, or if both things are possible. He's semi-retired, then Black Monday, and then, now he's a pariah. Okay, so a tangent based on that is, in the overall series, Alex always seems to know a guy that he can call with answers. Like Lou, whenever he has financial questions, or in this case, questions about boats. He's got Larry Dashoff, I believe he's another therapist. Mal Worthy is a lawyer that he often works with. Seth Fiaker is, I think, a professor that he's dealt with. There's another one that's escaping me that is a primary character in the book with Zelda Chase, and I can't think of his name, but is there another Lou, maybe? Lou Sherman? So he just always knows a guy. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, if you just went up to him in the street and said, hey, Alex, I need someone who's an expert on nuclear physics. Oh, I know a guy. And in the books, because they talk a little bit about the backstory in each case, but they don't really delve into it, it always seems to me like it's just a cheap literary trick. Like, yeah, I always know a guy. But if you think about it, and knowing the characters as you do in the way of the book, it's not out of character that somebody like Alex would know a lot of people in a lot of esteemed and, what's the word? Well-educated, well-informed positions. And I need that backstory fleshed out a little more. And I even wouldn't mind a separate book that specifically fleshed out the backstory of how he knows all these people. Because, again, I know people like that in real life that always know. I mean, heck, I'm one of those people in real life that people call me, do you know somebody that does this? Do you know some people that has this? And I often do. But there's always a way that happens. And I feel like it just with Alex, it seems like a coincidence, even though it's clearly not. Okay. What else? I've talked in past vlog episodes about reused plot devices. And one that's reused here is that Milo has some young detectives that hate him and he hates, and that cause him some degree of issues. In this case, it's Cash and Whitehead. In the future book, I believe it's Korn and Dimitri. Okay, so here's a pet peeve of mine that occurs in multiple books, and this is the first time that it's appeared in the series that I've been taking notes, is that Kellerman tends to use slang, nicknames, curses, etc. in ways that don't sound natural to me. Sometimes they come across the way that an older writer would try to write young to sound like hip and cool. And I don't think that's what it is, because Kellerman, he was not that old when these books were written, and at least the early books. And I don't think it is. I don't think he's trying to sound younger than he is. I think his interpretation of the way people use slang and use nicknames and use curse words just doesn't ring authentic and true to me. So in this book, there's an example. There's a chef Alex doesn't particularly like, that her name is Randy something or other. I can't remember her last name. But she says, what would I rather be cooking? Burgers. Burr-fucking-gers. And I've never heard anybody put the fuck in the middle of the word. Some people put the fuck at the beginning of the word, fucking burgers. Some people put it at the end. And I can't figure out how to do that, but Bill Burr has a whole bit on that, where, people put the curse word at the end of it. It doesn't feel authentic to me. It doesn't ring true. Okay, next thing. There's a character that's alluded to in the book named Carlton Blood, who comes up in future books, which is great. And reading these books, I'd always assumed he was a real historical figure until I actually Googled it and found out he's just a literary invention of Kellerman. And so I wonder every time I come across him now, is he based on a real person? So just for some context, he is a Nazi scientist that was an expert in poison gas. And in this book, he later came to America and worked for the U.S. government, and then either was executed by the U.S. government or something else happened to him, and we go into that in future books. But I've done some pretty extensive historical research, and I can't find a Nazi poison gas scientist that later came to the U.S. and worked for the U.S. government, so I think that maybe is a literary invention, but I don't know. And just because that's not the case, he could still be based on a Nazi poison gas scientist who never came to the U.S. He could also be based on someone who wasn't a Nazi. I just can't figure it out if he's based on a real person. Okay, so one of the murderers in the end of the book, and I won't say who it is, but one of the people who actually did the killing says, and I quote, "I don't need a lawyer got me into this." And that does not sound like something a hardened criminal would say. That never rung true to me. Okay, so I talked about one of the lawyers being Horace Sousa. I think maybe I didn't mention him by name. He was Jamie's defense attorney. And I wonder why Sousa gave Alex so much access if his primary agenda was to find out how much Alex knew. Because it seemed like anytime Alex, I want to do this, I want to speak to this person, I want to do this, Sousa always said yes. And there were plenty of things that he could have said no to. Like, I want to speak to this family member and this family member. Well, they're just not up to it right now. They're too stressed out there would have been any number of viable reasons not to allow every single thing he requested. If it's literally that his main reason for co-opting Alex, and he does use the word co-opt, would be to find out what he already knew from his treatment of Jamie and Jamie's phone call to him. So, yeah, that also kind of felt weird to me. Jamie is mentioned in future books, but I'd like to see more of him. All that really happens in future books is that he's alluded to. Oh, Jamie's here. Jamie's doing this now. Another character will bring him up, but we never actually see him or speak to him again. And I would like to go back to him. I really enjoyed Jamie as a character. So, that's pretty much my notes for this book. And I've been thinking, as I've been doing the series, which Kellerman book I discovered and read first. Because, usually what would happen would be sometimes my mom or a friend, would give me a murder mystery or a similar book and say, hey, you might like this. And it usually was part of a series, and it usually wasn't the first book in the series. And I've been trying to figure out what book introduced me to Kellerman. It might have been this one. And if that was the case, this was a really good book to start out in, because I feel like this one is pretty damn near flawless when it comes to Alex Delaware books. Like, some of the crutches that plague some of the other books, both before and after, are pretty absent here. This is just a pretty flawless Alex Delaware book. So the only reason I wouldn't recommend people start with this book is because I always believe you start at the beginning of the series. And there are a few exceptions to that. I feel I have trouble starting Parks and Recreation until Rock Show. Everything before Rock Show is cringy to me. The West Wing, I've talked about The West Wing, is one of my favorite shows, and I generally ask people to watch Take This Sabbath Day first, and if they like that, start back at the beginning of the series. But generally, when possible, I say start at the beginning. Again, using some examples, start The Office at the beginning, start Arrested Development at the beginning. I don't know. I don't generally suggest people start Discworld series at the beginning, and I'm trying to think about Law and Order. Start when Jerry Orbach gets there. I'm trying to think about things that I like, things that I consider part of my, Prince's albums. I don't suggest starting at For You. Stevie's albums, I don't suggest starting at Fingertips. So I guess it's not consistent that I say. But with Kellerman, I think it works pretty well to start at the beginning of the series. But if you were to start somewhere other than the beginning of the series, this would be a pretty good place to start. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this, and please like, comment, subscribe, all those things, and thanks for watching.